Purpose finds you. Stop searching and start becoming. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. You don't need another map. You don't need more questions disguised as answers, or more pressure cloaked as inspiration. You've carried enough of that. For too long, you've been told that purpose is something you must hunt down, like a prize just out of reach. That you must climb, strive, and conquer, until the meaning of your life reveals itself in some perfect, shining form. But what if that's never been true? What if purpose is not a peak to summit, but a current you've already stepped into, without even realizing? This book is not about helping you find your purpose. It's about helping you stop searching for it the way you've been taught to. It's about noticing what's already quietly forming beneath your feet, in the life you've been living all along. Purpose isn't hiding. It's simply quieter than the noise you've been taught to follow. It speaks in presence. It reveals itself in the way you carry a moment, not in what the moment achieves. Most people don't have a single defining mission. They have a thread, thin but strong, that winds through the ordinary. A way of being, a way of giving, a way of listening that slowly shapes a life of depth. You don't become purposeful by chasing meaning. You become purposeful by becoming someone who can hold meaning when it comes. Through devotion. Through small, honest acts. Through giving yourself fully to where you already are. This book is a gentle return, not to answers, but to rhythm. Not to urgency, but to presence. It's an invitation to shift your gaze from far-off destinations to the soil beneath your feet. It will not give you a final sentence to define your life, but it may offer a new way to live your way into the sentence yourself. Because maybe purpose isn't something you find. Maybe it's something that finds you when you finally stop running and begin, instead, to become. Welcome. Chapter 1. The Invisible Ache. There is a kind of longing that hides in the quiet moments, when the noise fades, and you're left with only yourself. It does not shout, nor does it plead. It waits in silence, like mist on a still morning. You feel it in the spaces between your tasks, when you lie in bed and wonder if this is what life was meant to be. It's not pain, not exactly. It's the subtle weight of wondering why all this doing never quite satisfies the soul. You've followed the steps, played the parts, reached for the horizon, but the ache lingers, not because you've failed, but because something deeper remains unmet. This ache doesn't come from lack of effort. If anything, you've tried too hard, filling calendars, pursuing milestones, reading books that promise clarity. You've asked the question again and again, what am I meant to do? But the more urgently you ask, the more elusive the answer becomes. Purpose, it seems, is not moved by pressure. It does not respond to panic. It waits for something quieter, something stiller, something slower. We live in a world addicted to outcomes. From an early age, you are taught to name your dream job, find your passion, and make it happen. But life rarely moves in straight lines. Most days are not grand epiphanies but quiet repetitions, and yet, within those repetitions, something sacred is forming. Like a potter at the wheel, meaning shapes itself slowly, through the rhythm of hands touching clay, again and again, until form emerges. The trouble is, we've been conditioned to believe that purpose should feel like fireworks, that one day we'll wake up and know. But the soul doesn't operate on spectacle. It moves like roots beneath the ground, invisible but essential. You may not see your purpose clearly, but that doesn't mean it's absent. It may simply be growing underground, quietly becoming what it needs to be. When the world around you speaks in declarations, the ache asks a question. Not, what will I do? But, what am I becoming? This shift in question opens a different door. No longer chasing a title, a calling, or a perfect plan, you begin to pay attention to the life already in motion. The conversation you had yesterday, the small act of kindness no one saw, the task you gave your full care to, even though it was ordinary. These moments are the soil where purpose takes root, not in grand gestures, but in honest presence. The ache you feel is not a flaw. It is a whisper, a quiet nudge toward a different way of living, not one driven by answers, but by presence, not one built on arrival, but on becoming. When you stop trying to conquer the ache and start listening to it, it begins to transform. It softens. It guides. It reminds you that purpose isn't something you discover once and for all. It's something that forms within you, as you give yourself fully to the life you're already in. So if you feel that gentle ache inside you, don't rush to fix it, sit with it. Let it speak. Let it show you that maybe the answer isn't out there waiting to be found. Maybe it's already here, waiting to be felt. Chapter 2: The Mirage of the Mission. We are told to find our calling as if it's buried treasure, hidden just beyond the next job, the next city, the next version of ourselves. From motivational posters to commencement speeches, the message is clear: your purpose is out there, and it's your responsibility to uncover it. But this framing creates a mirage, something that looks real from a distance but dissolves when you draw near. The more you chase the mission, the more it retreats into abstraction. Like chasing light on water, every grasp feels just out of reach. This mirage is seductive. It offers clarity, significance, identity. Who wouldn't want to discover the one thing they were born to do? The myth is clean, heroic, linear, but real life is none of these things. It is winding, layered, often contradictory. People change, seasons shift, and what once felt right can dissolve quietly over time. To treat purpose as a static destination is to miss the richness of becoming. And yet, the cultural script urges us onward, toward branding ourselves with a singular passion, packaging our value, announcing our mission to the world. The danger is not just in chasing something elusive. It's in turning life into a performance. When purpose becomes a platform, it begins to serve the self more than it serves others. The ego, clever in its disguises, can wear the clothes of meaning while secretly feeding on applause. And so we seek purpose not for its quiet truth, but for the validation it might deliver. We dream of doing something big, not realizing that bigness, divorced from depth, becomes hollow over time. This pursuit can leave us exhausted. We compare our lives to others' curated narratives, mistaking their confidence for clarity. We assume they've found their calling while we remain lost. But most people are improvising, adapting, becoming. What appears as certainty is often just comfort with motion. The truth is, many who seem purposeful have simply stopped demanding that every step be part of some grand mission. They've made peace with doing what's in front of them, fully and with care. Purpose, when reduced to a mission statement, becomes too small. It leaves out the messiness, the evolution, the mystery. Life resists being summed up in a sentence. And yet we try, because it gives us something to point to, something to believe we're working toward. But purpose is not a task to complete. It is a relationship to cultivate, with your values, your community, your inner life. There is nothing wrong with dreaming. Vision can inspire, mobilize, illuminate, but when vision becomes pressure, when it demands definition before understanding, it can harden the soul. Sometimes, the most important step isn't setting a mission, but softening your gaze. Looking around at what is quietly asking for your attention, what needs you, not someday, but now. The mirage loses its power when you stop needing it to be real. When you let go of the need to define your worth through a singular mission, you begin to experience purpose in its natural habitat, the present moment. In the way you listen, in the way you tend, in the way you serve without needing to be seen. So if you're still searching for your mission, pause, breathe. Consider that you might not be lost. You might simply be in between illusions, releasing the myth of the mission, so you can receive the truth of your life. Chapter 3: Standing Still on Purpose. There is a stillness beneath all movement, a presence beneath every decision we make. Yet in our constant striving, we often overlook this stillness, mistaking momentum for meaning. We think if we just move fast enough, far enough, surely we'll arrive at something profound. But the soul doesn't work that way. It doesn't respond to velocity. It responds to attention. And attention begins when we stop, when we finally let go of the chase and choose to inhabit where we are. In stillness, things begin to reveal themselves, not in the form of grand plans, but in subtle realizations, a sense of alignment. A quiet yes. The clarity we seek so desperately doesn't scream, it whispers. Mind whispers, but we only hear it when we stop running long enough to listen. We often believe that standing still is a form of failure, that if we're not progressing, we're falling behind. But some of the most purposeful moments are the ones where we do nothing but notice, observe, breathe. These are not idle moments, they are foundational. The world rewards motion. It celebrates hustle, ambition, forward thinking. But life, at its deepest level, is not about acceleration, it is about connection. And connection cannot be rushed, it blooms when we slow down, when we listen more than we speak, when we walk without needing to arrive. In this way, purpose is not found in motion, but in relationship, to self, to others, to the moment. It is not a destination we reach, but a quality of presence we cultivate. Stillness does not mean stagnation, it means rootedness. A tree is still, but not idle. Beneath the surface, growth is constant. The same is true for us. When we stop chasing, something begins to grow beneath the noise. It may be subtle, it may be slow, but it is real. And often, it's in these quiet phases, where nothing dramatic seems to be happening, that the deepest shifts occur. We begin to realign, to remember, to see with softer eyes. Standing still allows the noise to settle. It makes room for what we've been ignoring, not just pain or doubt, but wisdom. That gentle knowing we push aside in our pursuit of clarity. It was never that we lacked purpose. It was that we never paused long enough to notice how it was already present, quietly threading its way through our days. In stillness, we stop outsourcing our direction. We stop asking the world to tell us who we are. Instead, we begin to listen inward. What brings life? What feels sincere? What gently pulls us, not out of fear, but out of resonance? These questions do not demand answers. They invite openness, and in that openness, something ancient stirs, a sense of belonging. Not to a role or goal, but to the unfolding of life itself. The irony is, when we stand still, we often begin to move more clearly, not faster, but truer. Not in search of purpose, but as a vessel for it. Our actions stop being reactions. They become responses, measured, meaningful. Enough. So perhaps the invitation is not to find your purpose, but to stop long enough for purpose to find you. To stand still, not in apathy, but in reverence. To recognize that sometimes the most powerful step forward is the one where your feet do not move, but your soul finally arrives. Chapter 4. The Gravity of Enough. There is a quiet strength in deciding that what you have is already enough. Not because you've settled, not because you've given up on growth, but because you've stopped measuring your worth by how far there is left to climb. Enough is not a limit, it is an arrival. It is the moment when you look around and, instead of reaching, you begin to tend. Instead of chasing what might be, you pour yourself into what is. That shift, though subtle, changes everything. It moves you from absence to presence, from striving to inhabiting. Most of us are taught that contentment is dangerous, that if we're not hungry, we'll stop moving. But what if true movement doesn't come from hunger? What if it comes from fullness? From a place of quiet stability that allows us to act not from fear of lack, but from the richness of what already is. Enough isn't the end of growth, it's the soil from which real growth emerges, steady, grounded, and rooted in meaning rather than performance. When you operate from a sense of not enough, everything becomes extractive. You take from your time, your energy, your relationships, all in pursuit of some imagined completion. But when you see life through the lens of enough, you begin to give. You give your care to ordinary things. You give your time without resentment. You give your attention fully, because there's no longer a sense that your purpose lies elsewhere. Enough draws you into deeper relationship, with your tasks, with your people, with yourself. This does not mean comfort zones or complacency. It means you stop outsourcing value. You begin to trust that the day you're living is worthy of your full participation. That what you're doing, even if small, even if unseen, is not a placeholder for something better. It is the thing. And when you treat it as such, something remarkable happens. The ordinary becomes sacred. The mundane becomes a vessel for depth. And in this space, purpose begins to bloom, not as a revelation, but as a quiet presence that threads itself through every gesture. Enough is not a destination you reach. It's a perspective you practice. There will still be days when you want more, and that's human. But the gravity of enough pulls you back into balance. It reminds you that you are not behind, that your life is not on pause until something more significant arrives. That significance is not always spectacular. Sometimes it is simple, unassuming, like making tea with intention. Like listening without distraction, like waking up and choosing to show up again. There is a kind of depth that only becomes available when you stop needing the next thing to be better. When you stop trying to escape the moment you're in, enough doesn't dull your edge, it sharpens your presence. It allows you to go deeper rather than wider, to commit more fully, to experience rather than evaluate, and in doing so, you begin to discover that the life you're living was never lacking purpose. It was simply waiting for your whole self to arrive. So the invitation is not to silence ambition, but to anchor it. Let it rise from enoughness, not emptiness. Let it be a song of contribution, not a cry for worth. Because when you know that today is enough, you stop performing life and start participating in it. And that, perhaps, is where purpose first begins to take shape, not in what's added, but in what's finally seen. Chapter 5: The Sacred Pause. There is a holiness in stopping, a kind of grace that enters only when we allow space to unfold without needing to fill it. In a world that praises the constant doing, pausing can feel like rebellion. But it is in this pause that life inhales. That meaning, too delicate to shout over the noise, steps forward in silence. We are not taught to stop. We are taught to sprint, to build, to fix, to answer. Yet purpose is rarely found in acceleration. It lives in the space between movements, in the breath we almost forgot to take. When we pause, something softens. The armor we didn't know we were wearing begins to fall away. The striving quiets, not because we've figured it all out, but because we've finally allowed ourselves to not know. This is not failure. It's permission to feel instead of force, to rest instead of rush, to ask questions that don't have quick answers. In this sacred pause, we begin to realize that we've been searching too loudly for something that only responds to gentleness. Surrender is not giving up. It's giving over, releasing the need to control what cannot be controlled. It's trusting that the unfolding of life is wiser than your timelines. And in this trust, something inside you begins to relax. You begin to see that the answers you sought so desperately were never waiting at the end of your effort. They were waiting for your willingness to stop pretending you had it all figured out. The sacred pause reveals not just what's true, but what matters, and what matters is often simpler than we imagined. There is a season for momentum, but there is also a season for stillness, for sitting with what is unresolved and letting it be, for listening to the undercurrent rather than following the surface, for choosing, even briefly, to stop naming, measuring, fixing. In this space, the soul can stretch, it can breathe, and it can begin to speak, not in declarations, but in the soft language of longing and resonance. We are not machines built for endless progress. We are living stories, unfolding chapter by chapter. Some chapters are full of action, and some are made entirely of pauses. Both are necessary. Without the pause, the action becomes hollow. Without reflection, movement becomes noise. The sacred pause gives context. It reminds you why you're moving at all. It realigns you with values that may have become obscured in the rush to achieve. Purpose often arrives not when you push forward, but when you allow life to come to you, when you stop clutching and start receiving, when you let go of needing the next step to appear, and trust that standing still is a step too. In the sacred pause, your worth is not in question, it is assumed. Your value is not earned, it is recognized. And that shift is everything. So stop. Just for a moment. Not forever. Just long enough to hear yourself breathe. Long enough to notice the light as it moves across the room. Long enough to feel the pulse of the present. This moment, without answers, without progress, without clarity, this is holy ground. And it may be here, in the pause you once resisted, that your purpose begins to hum beneath the silence, waiting not to be chased, but to be welcomed. Chapter 6: Inner Alignment, Outer Flow. There is a moment when life begins to move with you rather than against you, when your actions cease to feel like struggle and begin to feel like expression. This shift does not come from mastering the external world, but from softening into the internal one. Inner alignment is not about perfection, it's about coherence. It's the quiet harmony between your values and your choices, your intentions and your direction. And when this alignment is present, the outer world starts to respond not with chaos, but with flow. Many people live out of sync with themselves, following paths prescribed by expectation, fear, or habit. They move forward but feel adrift. They act, but feel disconnected. They achieve, but feel hollow. This is not failure, it's misalignment. It's what happens when the inner compass is ignored in favor of louder voices. But that compass is always there, even when buried. It speaks in quiet discontent, in small joys, in the sense of relief when something feels right for reasons you can't explain. Listening to it requires slowing down, not because it is weak, but because it is subtle. Alignment is not about always knowing what to do, it's about noticing what feels true. When you begin to orient your life around that feeling, not as a fixed rule, but as a guidepost, you find that clarity grows where confusion once stood. You stop needing to manipulate outcomes. You start responding to life, rather than reacting to it. Your movements become less about proving and more about participating, less about performance, more about presence. In alignment, decisions don't become easier, they become lighter. You still face uncertainty, but you no longer carry it alone. You begin to trust yourself, not in a rigid way, but in a quiet, rooted way. You notice the difference between effort that drains and effort that energizes. You begin to say yes without resentment, and no without guilt. And through these small shifts, life begins to reshape itself around your truth. This does not mean every step is smooth. Flow is not the absence of challenge, it's the presence of direction. Like a river bending around rocks, you learn to adapt without abandoning yourself. You find rhythm not by controlling the current, but by learning how to move within it. When inner and outer worlds align, purpose stops being a question and starts becoming a way of being. It's no longer about finding the right role, the perfect passion, or the ultimate plan. It's about living in such a way that whatever you do becomes infused with meaning simply because it is true to you. Sometimes, this alignment asks for change. Sometimes, it asks for patience. It may guide you to let go of something once cherished, or to remain where you are with deeper intention. It may not always make sense to others, but alignment isn't about explanation. It's about integrity. It's the decision to let your life be shaped from the inside out, even when the world is noisy, even when clarity is incomplete. When you are aligned, you are no longer lost, not because you have all the answers, but because you trust the place from which your questions rise. You walk not with certainty, but with coherence. And in that coherence, purpose begins to emerge, not as a flash of insight, but as the natural consequence of living in tune with yourself. Chapter 7. The quiet task of showing up. There is a sacredness in the simple act of returning to your life, your work, your presence. Not in the dramatic gestures or public declarations, but in the unremarkable choice to be here, now again. This is the quiet task of showing up. It doesn't demand applause or reward. It doesn't seek recognition. It simply asks that you be faithful to the moment at hand, regardless of its glamour or lack thereof. And in this quiet consistency, something profound begins to take shape. We often underestimate the power of small, repeated acts. We imagine purpose as something large, something that arrives with force or clarity, something that changes everything at once. But most purpose is born in the repetition, in the ordinary. In the unnoticed ways you keep choosing to engage when it would be easier to withdraw. Purpose is not waiting at the end of a path, it is etched into every step you take with intention. There is no need for the moment to be perfect. It only needs to be met. Even in your tiredness, even in your uncertainty, even in your doubt, you can choose to show up. And that choice, made daily, builds something stronger than inspiration. It builds trust with yourself. Trust with the work, trust with life itself. When you keep returning, the world begins to open in ways that only consistency can unlock. We've been taught to believe that only passion fuels purpose, but passion comes and goes. What sustains is presence. What sustains is the quiet devotion to something that matters, even when it's difficult, even when it's dull. This is not a call to grind or to push. It's an invitation to honor what's before you, not because it's grand, but because it's yours. The quiet task of showing up is how purpose becomes real, not as an idea, but as a lived experience. The moments when it would be easiest to turn away are often the moments when meaning deepens. When you stay, when you care, when you offer your attention to what feels small, you begin to see that nothing is truly small. Every moment holds the potential to shape you, to align you, to move you closer to a life that feels true, but only if you are there to meet it. This kind of purpose doesn't announce itself. It reveals itself slowly, over time, through your participation. You won't always feel its presence, but you will feel the absence when you neglect it. There will be days when you wonder if it matters, days when your efforts feel invisible. But visibility is not the point. Connection is, alignment is, becoming is. And those things do not require an audience. They require only you. So show up, not perfectly, but honestly. Show up for the quiet tasks, for the unnoticed efforts, for the conversations that feel ordinary. Show up not because you're chasing a goal, but because you're honoring the life that's happening now. Each time you return, you strengthen the thread. Each time you stay, you stitch purpose more deeply into the fabric of your day. It is in this daily devotion, this quiet task of being present, that purpose begins to take root. Not as a role to play or a title to earn, but as a rhythm you live. And over time, without needing to define it, you begin to realize you are living it. You are no longer searching for purpose. You are embodying it, one quiet moment at a time. Chapter 8. The Rhythm of Devotion. There is a difference between discipline and devotion. Discipline often begins with force, a structured insistence on doing what must be done. But devotion flows from love. It is not a matter of control, but of care. When you move from devotion, your actions stop feeling like obligation and start feeling like a form of prayer. You don't push yourself to show up, you are drawn to it. You don't endure the repetition, you are nourished by it. And in that rhythm, something beautiful forms. A life not driven by pressure, but by quiet reverence for what matters. We've been conditioned to believe that purpose demands hustle, that you must grind your way to meaning. But anything born of grind alone cannot sustain the soul. It might produce results, but not resonance. It might gain attention, but not alignment. Or devotion, on the other hand, is slow, gentle. It asks not for urgency, but for sincerity. It doesn't shout. It returns, again and again, without fanfare. And in that returning, it deepens. It becomes its own source of strength. This rhythm of devotion is not rigid. It is not about perfect schedules or optimized habits. It is about attunement. Listening for what feels alive, trusting what draws you, not out of fear or ambition, but out of a quiet yes. When you follow that yes, not once but repeatedly, you begin to live and flow. Your energy aligns with your actions. Your time reflects your care. Your purpose, once abstract, becomes embodied. There is something profoundly grounding about doing the same thing, day after day, with your whole heart. Whether it's writing a single sentence, tending to a garden, making a meal, or showing up for someone you love, these acts, done with devotion, are not small. They are sacred. They build something within you that cannot be built any other way. A steadiness, a trust, a sense that you are part of something larger than your own plans. Devotion transforms the mundane into the meaningful. It is not what you do, but how you do it, and in that how, purpose finds its home. The rhythm may be quiet, even unnoticed, but it hums beneath your days like a heartbeat. You don't need motivation when you are moved by love. You don't need perfection when you are guided by care. You don't need to see the end when the process itself brings peace. There will be days when you forget, when the rhythm falters. That's part of it. Devotion does not demand flawless consistency. It invites return. And every time you return, you strengthen your connection, not just to the task, but to yourself. You remember who you are when you're not chasing or proving. You remember what matters when the world isn't looking. You remember that the point was never to be impressive, it was to be honest, present, alive. This is the paradox. The more you devote yourself to the present, the more your life begins to shape itself in meaningful ways. Not through control, but through alignment, not through achievement, but through attention, and slowly purpose stops being a mystery, it becomes a rhythm you can feel. A song you live by, a quiet echo of love woven into your everyday. So let your life become a rhythm of devotion, not perfect, but persistent, not loud, but deep. Trust that the repetition is not wasted, that each return is a thread, and that over time, those threads will weave something far more beautiful than any plan, a life lived on purpose, from the inside out. Chapter 9. Trusting the Silence. Silence is not empty. It is full of things we have not yet learned to hear. In the absence of noise, life begins to speak in a different voice, one that does not clamor for attention but waits with quiet patience to be noticed. Trusting the silence means letting go of the need for constant answers, letting go of the pressure to always know what's next. It means sitting in the space between what was and what will be, and allowing that space to be enough. Not as a pause in the story, but as part of the story itself. We are taught to fear the unknown, to fill the gaps with plans and explanations, but not everything meaningful can be mapped in advance. Purpose, like a seed beneath the soil, often begins in silence. It grows in the dark, unseen and unmeasured. It asks for time, for trust, for stillness. And in that stillness, you begin to hear something deeper than strategy. You begin to feel the quiet pull of what's true, not in your mind, but in your being. The silence does not offer guarantees. It does not promise clarity on your timeline. What it offers is space. And in that space, something begins to settle. The anxiety of needing to arrive softens. The compulsion to explain fades. You stop demanding answers and start practicing presence. You stop filling every moment with noise and start listening for the subtle rhythms beneath your thoughts. In the silence, you come home to yourself. There is a trust that grows only in the absence of certainty. It's the trust of a tree standing through winter, not knowing when spring will come, but rooted nonetheless. It's the trust of waiting, not passively, but attentively, watching, honoring, remaining open. Silence invites this kind of trust. It teaches you that becoming is not always loud, that transformation does not always announce itself, that sometimes, what you need most is not to act, but to allow. In a culture that values answers, silence can feel like failure. But it is not. It is a different kind of wisdom, one that doesn't rush to define but waits to understand, one that honors mystery, rather than trying to conquer it. The soul, after all, is not a problem to be solved. It is a presence to be witnessed, and that witnessing happens most clearly in the quiet. Trusting the silence doesn't mean you stop moving. It means your movement begins from a deeper place, a place that's been clarified, not by doing, but by being. You begin to act not from urgency, but from alignment. You begin to speak not to fill space, but to reveal truth. You begin to live not for outcome, but from integrity. And that shift, subtle as it may be, transforms everything. Let the silence hold you. Let it unmake the noise of comparison, the tension of needing to be further along. Let it show you that where you are is not a mistake, that the quiet is not a void, but a sanctuary, that what grows in silence often roots the deepest, and that in trusting it, you are not falling behind, you are finally allowing yourself to arrive. Purpose does not shout over the noise, it waits beneath it. And when you begin to trust the silence, you realize it was never empty. It was always full of the beginnings of who you are becoming. Chapter 10. What the eye can't measure. So much of what is real can't be seen. The roots beneath a forest. The warmth of trust. The quiet evolution of a life leaning steadily into itself. We are trained to notice what is visible, to measure what can be counted, to evaluate progress by its external signs. But some of the most profound growth happens in places the eye can't reach. It happens in silence, in repetition, in the way a person softens toward themselves without needing applause. Purpose grows there too, not as a spotlight, but as a deepening. We become disoriented when we look for purpose only in what others can observe. We wonder if we're falling behind because we can't point to something flashy or clearly defined. But purpose does not always look impressive. It often looks ordinary. It looks like tending to a child, showing up for work that feels small, and listening without offering advice. It looks like commitment that no one sees, like choosing to stay, to care, to try again. These are not setbacks. They are the hidden architecture of meaning. Growth is not a performance. It is not always about more. Sometimes it is about staying. Sometimes it is about letting go. Sometimes it is about resting so deeply into the present that you stop needing to prove yourself to anyone, even to yourself. And in that resting, something shifts. You begin to recognize that your life is not a problem to solve, but a field to tend. That purpose is not a trophy you earn, but a presence you build, one quiet act at a time. There is strength in what is unseen. Just because others don't notice it doesn't mean it lacks value. The roots of a tree are invisible, but they are what make its growth possible. The hours spent in quiet reflection, the choices made in solitude, the decision to continue when it would be easier to stop, these are not empty. They are foundational. They are where integrity is formed. They are where alignment becomes real. You do not need to be visible to be valuable. You do not need to explain your path to anyone. What you are becoming is not less real just because it can't yet be named. Trust the slow work. Trust the invisible unfolding. Trust that what matters most often takes the longest to appear. And that by the time it does, you will have become someone shaped enough to carry it. Purpose is not an achievement. It's a resonance. It's the way your life hums when you're living in tune with what matters. That hum may be quiet. It may not be recognized, but you will feel it. You will feel it in the peace that replaces striving, passion in the depth that replaces performance, in the gentleness with which you begin to hold yourself. These signs can't be measured, but they are the truest markers of becoming. So stop asking if you're far enough along. Stop trying to translate your growth into language that others will validate. Begin instead to notice what the eye can't measure, how you've become softer, how your presence has deepened, how your life, in its quiet, unfolding way, has started to feel like home. This is not the absence of purpose. This is what purpose feels like when it stops performing and starts living. Chapter 11: Presence over Pressure. There is a kind of power that emerges only when you stop hurrying. When you stop letting urgency shape your steps and begin to trust the pace of presence. In a world obsessed with progress, being present can feel like a kind of failure, like you've stopped reaching, stopped pushing, stopped climbing. But in truth, presence is not the absence of motion. It's the alignment of motion with meaning. It's moving because you're rooted, not restless. It's acting from stillness, not stress. Pressure tells you to be more, do more, prove more. It wraps the moment in expectation, making even rest feel like a waste. But presence dissolves that noise. It invites you back into the reality of now, where life is actually happening, not in the next goal, not in the next version of yourself. But here, in this breath, in this conversation, in this simple moment that doesn't need to be fixed, only felt. When you choose presence, you reclaim time, not in quantity, but in quality. 5 minutes of undivided attention carries more impact than hours of scattered effort. A single conversation held with care becomes a vessel for connection. A small task done fully becomes a thread in the fabric of a meaningful life. These are not minor details. They are the material of purpose, and they only reveal themselves when you stop rushing past them in search of something else. Presence does not ask you to abandon ambition, it asks you to refine it. To move from essence, not from ego. Act not because you're afraid of falling behind, but because you are attuned to what's calling you forward. When pressure leads, your life becomes a chase. When presence leads, it becomes a rhythm, one you can trust. One that knows when to move and when to rest, one that honors both the fire and the stillness. There is a kind of urgency that's born from fear. It whispers that you're not doing enough, that you need to catch up, that time is running out. But urgency rarely leads to depth. It leads to burnout, to misalignment, to actions that look productive but feel hollow. Presence, on the other hand, roots you in sufficiency. It reminds you that this moment is already whole, that you are already enough. And from that space, anything you do becomes an offering, not a performance. When you live from presence, you stop asking, "Am I doing it right?" and start asking, "Am I doing it with care?" You stop measuring your worth by output and start recognizing it in the way you meet your life, with gentleness, with attention, with willingness to be where you are without needing it to be different. And in that willingness, something begins to shift. The need to chase dissolves. The desire to control softens. What remains is clarity, not loud, not total, but honest. Purpose does not thrive in pressure. It withers. But in presence it breathes. It unfolds slowly, like a leaf turning toward light. And the more you choose presence over pressure, the more life begins to reveal itself not as something to conquer, but as something to enter. Fully, humbly, now. So pause, breathe. Notice what's here. This moment is not in your way, it is the way. Let it be enough. Let it be sacred. Let it be the quiet ground where your purpose continues to grow. Chapter 12: Becoming. There comes a point when the search quiets, not because all questions have been answered, but because you no longer need them to be. You look around at your life and see not a puzzle to solve, but a path that has been forming all along. The striving softens, the chasing fades, And what remains is the realization that purpose was never about discovering something new. It was about becoming someone true. Becoming is not a single act. It is not a title, a breakthrough, or a destination. It is the steady unfolding of self through presence, care, and honest repetition. It is built in the way you listen, the way you serve, the way you keep showing up, not because you must, but because something in you aligns with the act. And in that alignment, the need for dramatic transformation is replaced by a quiet belonging to your own life. The world may not notice this shift, there may be no applause, no grand reveal, but you feel it. In your breath, in your choices. In the way your life begins to carry a kind of coherence, not perfect, but peaceful. You no longer ask, "What am I here for?" with urgency. You ask it with openness, with a softness that trusts the answer is not out there waiting. It is being written now, through you. Becoming means letting go of the person you thought you needed to be. It means releasing the pressure to perform your life and beginning instead to live it, to tend it, to inhabit it with sincerity. The shift is internal. You move from proving to offering, from grasping to receiving, from defining to experiencing. And in that shift you become not a role, but a presence. Not an idea, but a witness to your own becoming. It's tempting to think that once you've found your purpose, everything will make sense, that clarity will erase confusion, that direction will replace doubt, but becoming teaches you otherwise. It teaches you that clarity is often partial, and that's enough. That direction can exist alongside uncertainty. That depth comes not from certainty, but from courage, the courage to keep becoming without needing to arrive. You realize that becoming is not something you control. It is something you allow. It is what happens when you stop resisting your life and start participating in it, fully, honestly, with care. Purpose does not bloom in the distance. It grows beneath your feet, watered by your attention and shaped by your consistency. The question is no longer, how do I find it, but how do I live in a way that lets it emerge? There is beauty in this simplicity, in knowing that nothing grand needs to happen for your life to be purposeful. You don't need a new job, a new city, or a perfect plan. You need only to keep becoming, keep returning. Keep offering the fullness of who you are to the present, and from that offering, meaning grows, quietly, powerfully, like light expanding through still water. In the end, you don't find your purpose by searching harder. You become it by living deeper. You become it by caring, by committing, by giving yourself to what's real. The person you are becoming is not an answer to be found, it is a truth to be lived. And that is where purpose finds you, not when you finally arrive, but when you finally become. Take care and be well.